Hi, it's the M.L.M for this whole channel. I do have a new topic for today. Before I begin, I just would like to say, may the words and expressions of my mouth, and the thoughts and meditations of my heart find favor and acceptance before you, Hashem. And continuing with Mesillas Yesharim from the Ramchal called Way of the Upright or Path of the Just. This is from the Art Scroll, and I will have a link to Art Scroll as well. Continuing on with part 18, if you're following along, and finally have gotten to chapter 3. It's still continuing about Zehirus, which is defined as vigilance. And in the last video, I did just a little bit of left in chapter 2, and then the summary. So I'm not going to go through that again. You can check in the last video. So I'm going to start with chapter 3 and see how far we get. I don't want to go too long, so we'll see how far. So he starts off here, he calls this the elements of Zehirus, and that's chapter 3, and he says, if one wishes to monitor himself in accordance with the concept of Zehirus, there are two assessments that he needs to make. One is that he must contemplate and identify the true good that man must choose, and the true evil from which he must flee. And what he says about that, he says that Ramchal explained in chapter 1 that the true good is closest to Hashem, while the true evil is distant from Hashem. Meaning, when you put yourself further away from Him, that's the evil, because you're separating yourself. I'm just adding that. The second area of scrutiny, so that's the first one, pertains to the deeds that he performs, which he must examine to see if they are in the category of what he has identified to be good, or in the category of what he has determined to be evil. So this first one, again, is to identify the good and what's the good and the true evil, and then also to scrutinize, the second one, the deeds he performed, to see whether they fit into each category. And commentary on here says, in the previous chapter, the Ramchal defined the essence of Zehirus as acting with awareness. Here he specifies two necessary components of that awareness: knowledge of what is good and what is evil, and an examination of one's actions in light of that knowledge. The first component is more readily attained, as it is a somewhat abstract exercise with the purpose of defining what a proper lifestyle should be. The second component, honest self-analysis of one's deeds, is a greater challenge, because one must contend with natural bias in his assessment of whether he acts properly. Meaning, you yourself, if you're going to judge yourself, you're more biased. So that's the problem, is that, when you look at it, it's not, you may be impartial to yourself, or partial to yourself, I should say, not impartial. Where someone else, I don't know if he talks about this later, but I'm just thinking if someone else would look at you or knows you and then would give you a true assessment because they see you, you don't judge yourself as making any mistakes usually, you try not to. And what he said here was from Rav Chaim Freelander in Sifsei Chaim Midos, Volume 1, page 85. So continuing on, the Ramchal expands on this second area of scrutiny, which is the assessment of one's deeds. He says, now this examination must be undertaken both at the time of performing a deed and not at the time of performing a deed, as follows. At the time of performing a deed, Zehirus requires that one not perform any deed without first weighing it upon the scales of this knowledge of the true good. And not at the time of so that's the first one, and then not at the time of performing a deed, Zehirus requires that one call to mind the totality of his past deeds, and weighs them similarly as he weighs his deeds when he actually does them on the scale of this assessment, to see what evil that they may contain so that he can eliminate it, and what good they contain so that he can persist in it and be reinforced with it. So he has to look at both sides to see what's good and what's not. And if he does discover some evil among his deeds, he should then contemplate and explore it in his mind what tactic he should use to turn away from that evil and become purified of it entirely. So the commentary here says, even if one has acquired the habit of analyzing his deeds before he acts, sometimes old habits or the stresses of a situation will prevail. That's very true. For example, one knows that he must concentrate properly during prayer or when reciting a blessing, but will often forget to do so. I think I've mentioned in other videos that what I've been trying to do more is use my finger as a pointer when I'm davening, when I'm praying or saying a blessing, because then you're focusing on it. You're not just rambling or, being a robot. So you're more concentrating. Or although one knows that it is wrong to display anger or use hurtful language, he may erupt when provoked or in reaction to a crisis. But such almost inevitable lapses will be uncovered through examination of one's deeds after the fact. So you have to look at your deeds and see if you're doing that. If analysis reveals that one has committed a transgression or performed a mitzvah in a less than optimal manner, he must evaluate his conduct to see how this can be avoided in the future. So he has to see what he can do. It is not enough simply to say, I will do better next time. One must think and plan. How can I make sure I will do better next time? And he says, I'm not going to where that is, I don't know. But anyway, you have to actually make a plan of action, like how am I going to do better the next time? And then he continues on, there is a Talmudic source for this important exercise. Our sages of blessed memory informed us of this requirement to examine our deeds when they stated in a Baraisa, in Eruvin 13b. It would have been more pleasant for a person not to have been created than to have been created. It says, in the Hebrew, it says, Noach lo adam shalom nivra yoter mishenivra. And the commentary here says, although the entire purpose of creation was to benefit man, as Ramchal explained at the beginning of chapter 1, the Gemara means that a person does not appreciate the value of his having been created. Caught up in temptation and desire, man finds it difficult to comprehend the goodness of his situation. That's from Rabbi Shal Salanter in Yisrael 23. So what he's saying is that you don't appreciate the fact that you were given this, that you were created. Then continuing on, he says, but now that he has been created, let him search his deeds. So, meaning you were already created, so now you have to figure out what's going on with your deeds. And others have taught the conclusion of the Bryce as saying, let him probe, literally feel his deeds. And then the Ramchal notes that a careful study of the Bryce reveals yet another dimension of proper self-analysis. And what's that? Now you will realize that these two versions of the Bryce present us with two excellent and extremely beneficial exhortations, searching and probing. For the searching of one's deeds means to examine the totality of one's deeds and contemplate them, to determine whether they include deeds that should not be done, and that do not conform with the commandments of Hashem and His statutes. For if any such deeds are found during the search, he must eliminate them completely. However, the probing, so that was the searching, the probing of one's deeds requires, by the second version of the Brisa, refers to another kind of scrutiny. Namely, it is the examination of even one's good deeds themselves. To examine and see whether there is any improper motive within them. Meaning, maybe you're doing it, you're not doing it lishma, meaning l'shem shamayim. So you have to examine those too, and I'm adding that. To examine and see whether there is any improper motive within them. I said that. Or any bad component that he must remove and eliminate. So the commentary here says examining one's mitzvot for flaws demands greater finesse than does rooting out improper actions from Matnas Chelko. For the mitzvahs, or the deeds themselves, are praiseworthy, which can blind the person to his having performed them in a less than optimal manner or with less than perfect motives. The common example of charity can serve to illustrate this point. A person might give generously to an important cause at the cost of some personal sacrifice, but he was motivated in part by a desire for his peers to see him as a charitable person. That's the same thing with, and I'm adding this, and I didn't finish the commentary, but like someone has their name put up, like they give charity for something in a shul or something, and they want their name, like so and so donated this for the shul, and they have their name next to a little plaque. So that's like actually getting your reward in this world, where you shouldn't be putting your name on it. You should just put anonymous, because it's like that's taking away from your reward in Olam Haba. I know that, I've heard that from many rabbis. So it's better to not do it. It's better to do it for the purpose of Shemayim, and not that someone should say, oh, look, wow, you donated this, a big deal, and that's not a good thing. That's also your pride, you're proud, everyone thinks of you as such a good person. Not that you're not, but that's just what I'm saying. Okay, and then he goes on to say, or he did not contribute as much as he really could have, or he gave the money to the needy person in a public setting, causing the recipient's obvious appreciation to be tinged with an element of embarrassment. The overall nobility of the donor's charitable act tends to obscure his awareness of its flaws, which he will not uncover unless he looks objectively and deeply into himself and at what he has done or left undone. And then further commentary from Rav Avram J. Twersky highlights the importance of this purification of our good deeds with a story. Two men were discussing the quality of their spirituality and how they would fare before the heavenly tribunal on the day of judgment. Woe is me, said the first, I will be found to have committed many grievous sins. That is not my fear, said the second, for there is no man on earth who always does good and never sins. That's from Koheles 7:20. What I truly fear is the heavenly scrutiny of my mitzvot. Why didn't I perform the mitzvot properly? When I prayed and studied Torah, why did my mind wander to ponder extraneous matters? Why did I do some mitzvot by rote? Why did I do some mitzvot ostentatiously to impress people with my piety? Against these accusations, I fear I will have no defense. At least when engaged in the service of Hashem, I should have done it properly. That's from Lights Along the Way. I don't know if that's from Rabbi Avram J. Twersky's book. That might be. Okay, and then continuing on, I'm going to finish up here really soon here. This form of inspection is analogous to one who probes and feels a garment thoroughly before purchasing it, to examine whether it's good and strong or weak and worn. For a garment may appear to be sturdy and well made, when in reality it is seriously flawed. In a similar manner, one must probe his good actions thoroughly, to examine their nature with the most rigorous examination, until he is left purified and cleansed of any and all traces of impropriety. And commentary here says, an incident related about the Rebbe of Kutsk illustrates the extent to which a person must always examine his deeds to ensure that the Yesharim has not infiltrated them. It is told that when the Rebbe was on his deathbed, one of his followers asked him, "Does the Yesharim still attempt to push one to sin even at a moment like this?" "Of course," the Rebbe replied. "Even now he is standing beside my bed and whispering into my ear, make sure to say Shema Yisrael in a loud and impressive manner, so that the people will say that the Rebbe of Kutz died in purity with Shema Yisrael on his lips." You see, even then he's trying to make you sin. And then he says in summation, and that's where I'm going to stop. In summation, the sum of the matter is that a person should analyze all of his deeds and monitor all of his ways. Commentary here says, when it says ways, which is Hebrew drachav, it refers to one's character traits, in contrast to the deeds mentioned first. So this is his ways, his character traits. And then it says, see above chapter 2, we're not going to go there. Both must be scrutinized pure, meaning his deeds and his ways both must be, you must have to examine them. So he says, and monitor all of his ways so that he does not leave himself with any bad habit or negative character trait, and certainly not with any transgression or sin. So I'm going to stop here, and I hope and pray that we all merit to live and see the coming of Mashiach, speedily in our days and the rebuilding of our final and everlasting Beit HaMikdash. Amen, and thanks for watching.